Welcome, thou hast done well to find thy way to me this day. Today, let us speak of a truth that touches the very core of thy being, the level of thy soul. Know this first and foremost: the height of a soul is never measured by the yardsticks of this world, such as academic degrees, vast fortunes, or fleeting fame. Nay, it is determined by the sorrow thou hast tasted, the kindness thou hast kept, and the suffering thou hast overcome. All these trials were but the stones used to polish thy spirit and raise thy vibration to the heavens. Perhaps thou hast felt that thy life has been a series of hardships, or that thou art small and insignificant. Yet, strange as it may seem, those with the most magnificent souls often walk a path of humility, unaware of their own greatness. In this tale, we shall uncover the hidden characteristics of a high-level soul, the spiritual signs of thy awakening, and the divine mystery of why such souls bloom most gloriously in their later years. Dost thou feel a quiet stirring within thy heart? It is because light is about to be shed upon the depth of thy true self. Prepare thyself, for this time is dedicated to the truth of who thou really art. Chapter 1: The Deepest Wounds, or the Entrance to Light. Let us begin the first chapter of our journey. I invite thee to open the ears of thy heart and listen closely. We speak today of the level of the soul, a matter that touches the very truth of thy existence. Tell me, dost thou believe that a person's worth is measured by the weight of their gold, the number of their scrolls of learning, or the loudness of their fame in the marketplace? Nay, I tell thee, it is not so. The height of a soul is not found in these fleeting shadows of the world. It is carved by the sorrow a person has tasted. It is deepened by the kindness they have nurtured amidst cruelty. It is forged in the fires of suffering and the courage found to overcome it. All these experiences, painful though they be, are the very tools God useth to polish thy spirit and raise thy vibration to the heavens. Perhaps thou hast looked at thine own life and thought, "Why must I walk such a stony path?" Thou mayest see others who seem to walk on petals of roses, while thy feet are bruised and weary. But hearken to this: there exist in this world souls of immense height and ancient wisdom. And strangely, these noble spirits rarely think of themselves as high or mighty. Rather, they behave with extreme humility, often thinking, "I am but a simple traveler, I am nothing of great note." Why is this so? It is because the more mature a soul becomes, the more it understands the vastness of God's law. They know, unconsciously, that they are but a small part of a great divine tapestry. Silence and depth become their nature. Dost thou recognize this in thyself? Those with high souls often bear a heavy burden in the first half of their lives. They endure profound loneliness. They are often misunderstood by their kin and peers. They labor without reward, their good deeds unseen, their intentions misjudged. It is as if they speak a language of light in a world that only knows the dialect of shadows. God dares to give these polished souls trials that would break a lesser spirit. Why? Because the Lord wishes to invite them to even greater heights. Think of the Akoya oyster that lies on the ocean floor. When a grain of sand, a sharp, irritating intruder, enters its shell, the oyster suffers. It feels pain, but it does not curse the sand. Instead, it wraps the intruder in layers of nacre, transforming the pain into a lustrous pearl. So it is with thee. Thy suffering is not a punishment, it is the grain of sand that shall become thy pearl. I have seen many such souls in my time. I recall a man who lost everything: his home, his status, his name. He sat in the dust, weeping, asking the heavens, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" For years he walked in the valley of shadows. But in that darkness, stripped of all worldly pride, he began to see a light that others could not see. He learned that the only thing he truly possessed was the love in his heart. Years later, that same man became a healer of souls, his mere presence bringing peace to the tormented. His suffering had hollowed him out, only to make him a flute through which God's breath could play a beautiful melody. Thou, too, may currently be in the midst of the fire. Thou mayest feel that the world is cold and indifferent, But I say unto thee, the scar on thy soul is the place where the light enters. If thou hast felt a deep sadness that seems older than thy years, take heart. It is the mark of a veteran soul. These trials in the early years of life are not accidents. They are the necessary curriculum for a leader of spirits. God does not polish a pebble, he polishes a diamond. And the friction thou feelest is the grinding of the wheel that reveals thy brilliance. Consider the lotus flower. It does not bloom in the clear, running water of the mountain stream. Nay, it chooses the thickest, darkest mud of the pond. It pushes its way through the mire, through the darkness, seeking the sun. And when it finally breaks the surface, its petals are unstained by the mud that birthed it. Thou art that lotus. The mud of thy difficulties is the very nutrient that feeds thy awakening. Do not despise the mud, my friend. Do not despise the loneliness, for it is in the solitary darkness that the roots grow deep. Some of thee may ask, but why must it be so hard? If I am a good soul, should not my path be easy? Ah, that is the logic of the merchant, not the logic of the divine. A merchant trades coin for comfort. A soul trades comfort for growth. The higher the building is to stand, the deeper the foundation must be dug. If thou art digging deep into the earth of despair right now, it is because God intends to build a tower of light upon thy life. The "why me?" that echoes in thy mind is a valid question. But let the answer be this: because thou art strong enough to bear it. Because thou art being prepared for a destiny that requires shoulders of steel and a heart of velvet. We are now touching upon the first noble truth of existence, the reality of suffering. But for the high soul, suffering is not a pit to die in, it is a tunnel to walk through. Thou art not a victim of a cruel fate. Thou art a student in the most advanced classroom of the universe. Hold thy head high, even if tears stream down thy face. For every tear is a prayer, and every moment of endurance is a deposit in the bank of heaven. Thy time of blooming is not yet, perhaps, but the preparation is well underway. Trust in the process, trust in the pain, for it is carving the cup that shall one day hold the wine of divine joy. Chapter 2: The Price of a Noble Soul. We continue our discourse, delving deeper into the nature of thy spirit. The first characteristic of a soul that has reached a high level is found in the very root of its gentleness. I ask thee, what is the source of thy kindness? Is it merely a polite habit taught by thy parents? Nay, for the souls I speak of, kindness is not a mask worn to please others. It is a profound tenderness that has sprouted from the soil of deep personal injury. Those who have truly suffered, those who have walked through the valley of despair and survived, possess a unique vision. Because their own hearts have been broken, they are acutely aware of the cracks in the hearts of others. I speak now from my own experience, and perhaps thou shalt see thyself in this mirror. Have there been times when thou hast looked into the eyes of a stranger and felt a sudden pang of grief? A person may be smiling before thee, speaking words of joy or confidence. Yet, thou feelest a heaviness in thy chest, a constriction in thy throat. Thou knowest, without a word being spoken, that this person is weeping inside. This is the burden of the high soul. Thou possessest an intuition that pierces through the surface. While the world listens to the loud words of the mouth, thou listenest to the silent whispers of the vibration. This ability, my friend, is both a gift and a wound. Because thou hast known the coldness of the world, thou strivest to be the warmth for others. Thy soul remembers the freezing winds of isolation, and thus, thou becomest a hearthfire for any shivering traveler who crosses thy path. But here lies the tragedy, and the beauty, of thy nature. Thou canst not simply ignore the pain of others. When a friend complains, or even when a stranger passes by in anger, thou dost not merely hear it. Thou feelest it. It is as if thy soul has no skin. Thou absorbest their emotions as a dry sponge absorbs water. Thou talkest their heavy, dark vibrations into thine own vessel and attemptest to carry it for them. Let me tell thee of a holy man I once knew, a hermit who lived high in the mist-covered mountains. His soul was as clear as a pristine lake, polished by years of silence and prayer. One day, he decided to descend into the bustling city to offer his blessings. But the moment he stepped into the crowded marketplace, he fell to his knees, gasping for breath. Was he sick of body? Nay, he was overwhelmed by the chaotic, heavy thoughts of the multitude. Greed, envy, lust, anger, these unseen forces hit him like physical blows. Because his soul was so open and pure, he had no shield against the lower vibrations of the masses. He had to retreat, to cleanse himself in the waters of solitude once more. Dost thou often feel exhausted for no apparent reason? Thou goest to a gathering, or perhaps just to the market to buy bread, and thou returnest home feeling as though thou hast fought a great battle. Thy body aches, thy mind is clouded, and a sudden sadness washes over thee. Hearken to me, this is not because thou art weak, it is because thou art functioning as a spiritual lightning rod. In this world, there is much darkness, much heavy karma that floats like smog in the air. Souls like thine act as purifiers. Unconsciously, thou drawest in the static electricity of the environment, grounding it through thy own body to neutralize it. Thou art a living filter for God's creation. Thou cleansest the atmosphere simply by walking through it. But this noble work comes with a price. Because thou art so accepting, so willing to understand the pain of others, thou art often taken advantage of. The pure soul does not judge. Even when a person comes to thee with malice or deceit, thou lookest past their sin and seest their wounded inner child. Thou thinkest, if I just love them enough, they will heal. And so, thou openest the door to those who would steal thy light. The world may call thee foolish. They may say thou art too soft, that thou lackest street wisdom, that thou art destined to lose in the game of life. Let them speak. They judge by the laws of the jungle, thou livest by the laws of heaven. There is a profound reason why thou art made this way. Thou art not a victim of thy sensitivity. Thou art a warrior of love. But a warrior must also know how to tend to his wounds. If thou hast felt that living in this world is like walking naked through a field of thorns, it is proof positive that thy soul has matured beyond the common measure. That pain thou feelest when others are cruel, it is the evidence of thy connection to the oneness of all things. Those with young, shallow souls can hurt others and feel nothing. But thou, who art connected to the divine web, feelest the tremble of every leaf. So, I ask thee now, canst thou forgive thyself for being too sensitive? Canst thou stop blaming thyself for being too nice and getting hurt? That tenderness is thy crown. Do not let the harshness of the world turn thy heart into stone. To keep a soft heart in a hard world is the greatest bravery of all. However, thou must also learn that thy energy is sacred. Thou hast carried the burdens of others for too long. The exhaustion thou feelest is a signal from thy spirit saying, "Rest, my child. Thou hast done enough for today." Being a lightning rod protects the house, but the rod itself endures the scorching heat. Thou must learn to discharge that heat. Be proud of thy scars. They are the majestic embroidery on the robe of thy soul. Thou art a vessel of mercy in a merciless time. And for that, the heavens applaud thee, even when the earth ignores thee. Chapter 3: The Dissonance of the Soul. Let us now turn our gaze to the second great characteristic that marks the soul of high stature. It is found in their relationship with solitude. Observe the eagle. Does it fly in a flock, chirping and chattering like the common sparrow? Nay, the eagle soars alone. It rides the high winds where the air is thin and pure, far above the dust of the earth. The higher one ascends, the fewer companions one finds. This is not a tragedy, it is the physics of the spirit. Souls of great depth do not seek to form cliques or factions. They have no desire to shout loudly to assert their existence, nor do they wish to intimidate others with their power. They do not flock, rather, they cherish the time spent alone as a precious jewel. From the omniscient viewpoint of the heavens, the reason for this is clear as crystal. It is not because these souls are antisocial or lacking in warmth. It is because they carry within them a vast and fertile inner world. Imagine, if thou wilt, a great library hidden within the chest of a man. This is no ordinary library filled with books of paper and ink. It is the Akashic record, the library of the cosmos, where the wisdom of past lives and the whispers of divine truth are stored. The high soul is constantly listening to the resonance of these ancient truths. There is a melody playing within them, a high, clear hum of the spirit, that connects them directly to the source. Now, consider the nature of the world outside. The marketplace of human society is filled with a different kind of noise. It is the cacophony of ego. It is the heavy, grinding vibration of competition, of jealousy, of the desperate hunger for material things and the validation of others. When a soul that is tuned to the celestial choir steps into this discordant clamor, what happens? It suffers a violent dissonance. It is like trying to play a delicate harp in the middle of a thunderstorm. The sensitive instrument vibrates with every crash of thunder, risking the snapping of its strings. This is why the high soul feels deeply exhausted by the noise of the world, not just loud sounds, but the loud, chaotic intentions of people. Therefore, they seek silence. They are drawn, as if by a magnetic force, to the quiet of the forest, the stillness of the shrine, or the vast emptiness of the ocean shore. In these places, the heavy fog of human thought is lifted, and the pure vibration of nature restores their own rhythm. To the eyes of the world, such a person may seem lonely. Society often views solitude as a defect, a sign of weakness or a lack of popularity. Why is he always alone? They whisper. Is she not sad? How little they understand. For the awakened soul, solitude is not an empty box, it is a fortress. It is a sacred sanctuary where they hold their most important meetings with God. In the silence, when the voices of others have faded away, the high soul opens the books of its inner library. They read the history of their own spirit. They decipher the messages sent from the stars. This practice of being alone is, in truth, the highest form of spiritual discipline. It is in the quiet moments that their connection to the divine is purified and their mission on this earth becomes clear. They choose the deep satisfaction found in God's light over the thin, fleeting pleasures of worldly distraction. Because their roots have grown deep through many lifetimes of experience, they no longer need to sway with every wind of human emotion. Their anchor is set in the bedrock of the universe. Let me ask thee, weary traveler, dost thou find more comfort in the silence of an empty room than in the laughter of a crowded banquet? Does the thought of a quiet walk under the moon bring thee more joy than the praise of men? If thou answerest, yea, then let not thy heart be troubled by the judgments of others. Do not think thyself strange or broken. This preference for quietude is the undeniable proof that thy soul has outgrown the toys of the playground. Thou art no longer a child needing constant entertainment. Thou art an elder spirit, seeking the counsel of the eternal. The world is a noisy place, and it tries to convince thee that silence is empty. But thou knowest the truth. Silence is full. It is pregnant with answers. It is the only place where the voice of God can be heard without distortion. The dissonance thou feelest when forced to conform to the low vibrations of the crowd is a protective mechanism. It is thy soul's way of saying, "This is not where I belong." Return to the source. So, when thou feelest the urge to withdraw, do not fight it. Do not force thyself to wear the mask of the sparrow when thou art born an eagle. Retreat to thy fortress. Build thy walls of silence high and strong. For it is in that holy isolation that thou shalt find the strength to eventually return and serve. The deeper thy solitude, the brighter thy light shall be when thou choosest to share it. Be proud of thy need for peace. It is the hallmark of spiritual nobility. Chapter 4: The Trial of Divine Love. Let us now speak of the most notable characteristic that distinguishes the interior of a high soul. It is the posture of the heart when facing the fires of tribulation. Cast thy mind back, if thou hast the courage, to the most difficult seasons of thy life. When the winds of misfortune howled against thy door, and the cold rain of injustice soaked thee to the bone, what was the cry of thy heart? It is the nature of the unripe soul to point the finger outward. When they stumble, they cry, "Why has this person done this to me?" Or, "Why does the world conspire against my happiness?" They seek a villain to blame, for in blame, they find a fleeting comfort for their ego. But thou art different, art thou not? The soul of high stature, when met with a crushing blow, does not waste its energy in cursing the stone that tripped it. Instead, its gaze turns inward, into the silent chamber of the self. They ask a question that the heavens lean down to hear. What is this pain trying to teach me? What knot in my spirit is this trial attempting to untie? They do not ask, "Why me?" in the voice of a victim. They ask, "What now?" in the voice of a student. This profound introspection is the most sacred discipline of all. It is the very friction that polishes the rough stone into a gem. God loveth the soul that seeketh truth in the midst of the storm more than the soul that merely prays for the storm to cease. Know this, my friend, the suffering thou hast endured is not a punishment for thy sins, nor is it a sign that thou hast been abandoned. Nay, it is a compliment from the divine. It is a gift, though wrapped in jagged thorns. Think of the ancient art of alchemy. The alchemist takes the base metal, the heavy and dull lead, and places it into the crucible. He applies heat. Intense, scorching heat. Not to destroy the metal, but to purify it. He seeks to transmute it into gold. Thou art that metal. The trials of thy life are the alchemical fire. God is the alchemist. He knows that within thee lies a gold so pure it could outshine the sun, but it is buried beneath layers of ego and fear. The heat must be high to melt away the dross. Consider the sword of the finest steel. Before it can sing in the air and cut through the darkness, it must endure the forge. It is thrust into the white-hot coals until it glows and softens. Then, it is placed upon the anvil and struck, again and again, by the heavy hammer of the smith. If the iron could speak, it might scream, "Stop! Why dost thou beat me? I have done no wrong." But the master smith knows better. He strikes not to break the iron, but to align its molecules, to make it unbreakable. He plunges it into the shock of cold water to temper it. Only after this ordeal is the weapon fit for the hand of the king. Thou hast been in the fire. Thou hast felt the blows of the hammer. Perhaps thou art feeling them even now. But fear not the fire, for it refines thee. The Creator entrusts the deepest, most complex trials only to those with the capacity to bear them. A small cup can only hold a small measure of water. If God intends to pour the ocean of His wisdom into thee, He must first expand thy vessel. Pain is the tool that stretches the soul. It cracks the rigid walls of the heart so that more light may enter. This is the divine alchemy transforming the lead of thy suffering into the gold of compassion. The trials given to thee are not merely for the clearing of past karma. They are the rigorous training for thy future leadership. Every tear thou hast swallowed in silence has added weight to thy presence. Every time thou chosest forgiveness over revenge, thy vibration ascended a step closer to the divine. Those with shallow roots try to flee from suffering, they numb themselves with distractions. But the deep soul embraces the suffering, holding it close until it reveals its secret blessing. They do not rot in their despair, they rise from it, quiet and majestic. Look at the history of this world. Hath there ever been a true sage, a true guide of humanity, who walked a path of ease? Nay, they were all forged in the furnace of adversity. The wisdom they offered to the world was distilled from their own agony. The insight that heals others is born from the wound that once bled in oneself. Thou art being prepared for such a role. The insight thou gainest now, in the dark night of thy soul, shall become the lantern with which thou shalt guide others in their darkness. The depth of thy past pain is the measure of the height of thy future service. If thou hast managed to turn thy past sorrows into a source of kindness rather than bitterness, then hear me well. Thy vibration is already resting in the high places. Thou art becoming a pillar of light for a world that is losing its way. The why of thy suffering is simple. God needed a heart strong enough to love the unlovable and wise enough to understand the broken. And he found that heart in thee. So, despise not the hammer. Thank the fire, for thou art being shaped into a masterpiece of the Spirit. Chapter 5: The Great Clearing of the Way. We have spoken of the fire that refines thee, and the solitude that nourishes thee. Now, as thy soul begins to ascend, as thy vibration becomes clearer and more resonant, a profound shift must occur in the world around thee. This is the turning point of our tale. It is the moment when the unseen spiritual signs begin to manifest in thy visible reality. The first and most jarring of these signs is the quiet, yet absolute, transformation of thy relationships. Hear me, for I speak to a sorrow that may be fresh in thy heart. Hath it happened recently that a friend, a lover, or even a family member has suddenly drifted away? Perhaps a job thou didst once cherish has abruptly ended, or a circle of companions has closed its doors to thee. It happens not with a bang of conflict, but often like a leaf withering on the branch until it simply falls. When this occurs, the human heart is prone to panic. Thou askest, "What did I do wrong?" Thou searchest thy memory for faults, thinking thou hast offended them or that thou art unworthy of love. But I say unto thee, raise thy head. This is not a punishment for thy sins. It is not a sign of thy failure. It is the divine protection of the Most High, working with surgical precision to save thee. The soul that flies high cannot remain tethered to the heavy weights of the earth. Those relationships ended because their vibration could no longer harmonize with thine. Imagine, if thou wilt, a great tree standing in the forest. When the season of autumn comes, the tree does not cling fearfully to its old, dry leaves. It does not weep and say, "Oh, do not leave me, dear leaf." Nay, the tree knows the law of life. It knows that if it holds on to the dead matter of the past, the fresh green buds of spring can never emerge. The tree allows the wind to strip it bare. It stands naked and vulnerable in the winter cold, trusting in the cycle of renewal. Thou art currently in thy winter. God is stripping away the people and situations that have served their purpose in thy life. They were necessary for a season, yes. They taught thee lessons, they gave thee comfort, or perhaps they gave thee the pain needed to grow. But their time is done. To cling to a connection that holds a low or heavy vibration is to willingly shackle thyself in a dungeon. Thy soul is crying out for the heights, but these old bonds are anchors dragging thee back into the mud. The divine sees this danger. God knows that if thou stayest in that company, thou shalt dim thy light to match theirs. And so, with a mercy that feels like a sword, he cuts the cord. He severs the tie that thou hast not the strength to sever thyself. It acts as a circuit breaker to prevent thy spirit from burning out. There is a distinct flavor to this kind of separation, one that tells thee it is the work of heaven. Recall the moment after the bond was broken. Beneath the sadness, beneath the fear of being alone, was there not a strange, quiet sense of relief? A feeling that a heavy coat had been lifted from thy shoulders? That subtle sigh of the soul is the undeniable proof of divine intervention. It is the sound of thy spirit breathing freely for the first time in years. Trust that feeling. It is the Amen of thy guardian spirits. This process is what the wise call space-making. Behold a cup filled to the brim with old, stale water. Even if God wishes to pour the golden nectar of new blessings into thy life, he cannot. There is no room. The cup must be emptied first. The emptying is painful, for we grow attached to our stale water. We fear the void, but the void is holy. The empty space in thy life, the empty chair at the table, the silence where a voice used to be, is a sacred vacuum. And by the laws of the universe, nature abhors a vacuum. That space is being cleared to be filled with something far better, something that matches the brilliance of who thou hast become. Therefore, when people depart, let them go with grace. Do not chase after them. Do not debase thyself by begging for the return of what God has removed. To chase the past is to tell God that thou preferest the old heavy chains to the new wings he offers. Bless them as they go. Say in thy heart, thank you for the lessons. Go in peace. This attitude of non-attachment is the key that unlocks the next gate. Thou art not losing friends, thou art graduating. When a student moves from one grade to the next, he leaves behind the classroom of the past. He does not hate the old classroom, but he cannot stay there if he wishes to learn new truths. Perhaps thou feelest lonely in this transition. The space between the old leaving and the new arriving can feel like a desert. But remember the Israelites in the wilderness. The desert was necessary to wash the slavery of Egypt from their minds before they could enter the promised land. Thou art in the desert of purification. Thy vibration is stabilizing. Thy true tribe, the souls that belong to thy future, are making their way to thee even now. But they can only find thee if thou art standing in thy true light, not hiding in the shadows of a dead past. So, I beseech thee, fear not the goodbye. Embrace the solitude of the empty room. Cleanse thy house. Prepare the guest chamber of thy heart. For the King of Glory and the companions of light are preparing to enter. This clearing is not the end of thy story. It is the deep breath before the singing begins. The stage is being set for the second act of thy life. A life of freedom, of true connection, and of deep, resonant joy. Thou hast survived the pruning. Now, watch how thou shalt bloom. Chapter 6: The Quiet Awakening. And now, beloved soul, we arrive at the holy ground of our journey. We have walked through the valley of the shadow of death. We have endured the fire of trial and the cold wind of separation. But as the night is darkest just before the dawn, so too does the greatest weight precede the greatest release. We speak now of the third noble truth, though we need not name it so. We speak of the cessation of pain. We speak of the moment the clouds part. There comes a day, a specific, blessed day, in the life of the high soul, when a miracle of the inner world takes place. It does not come with the blast of trumpets or the applause of multitudes. Nay, it arrives on the feet of silence. Picture this: thou wakest up one morning, and the air seems different. The sunlight streaming through the window seems to hold a golden quality thou hast not seen since childhood. And within thy chest, where once there sat a heavy, cold stone of anxiety, there is suddenly nothing, only space, only a vast, serene lightness. Thou drawest a breath, and it fills thy lungs without resistance. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of, I must survive, or, I must fix this, has vanished. This is the third sign, and it is the most glorious of all. It is the sign of spiritual rebirth. It is a sensation of groundless, quiet conviction that whispers, it is finished. All is well. This is not merely a change of mood. Do not mistake this for the fleeting happiness of a sunny day or a good meal. This is a structural shift in the architecture of thy soul. Thou hast finally climbed above the cloud line. Below thee, the storms may still rage, the world may still be chaotic, but where thou standest, the sky is eternally blue. Why does this happen? Let me reveal the mechanism of the heavens to thee. As we spoke of before, souls of thy caliber often volunteer to be the cleaners of their lineage. For years, thou hast been carrying the heavy, dark karma of thy ancestors and the people around thee. Thou hast been fighting a spiritual war, taking in the negativity and burning it up with the fire of thy love and patience. It was a long, exhausting battle, but that battle has a limit. The sudden lightness thou feelest is the victory cry of the spirit. It means the debt is paid. The cycle is broken. Thou hast successfully transmuted the lead into gold. In that moment of release, thy guardian spirits, who have watched thee struggle with tears in their eyes, step forward. With hands of light, they lift the yoke from thy shoulders. They say, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast carried this long enough. And they pull the heavy chains of the past out of thy aura. It is a divine intervention, a surgical removal of the old suffering. Because thy soul has awakened to its true nature, the lower vibrations can no longer cling to thee. They slide off thee like water off the feathers of a swan. I liken this feeling to a sailor who has been at sea for months in a violent hurricane. Night after night, the waves crashed over the bow. The wind screamed like a banshee. The sailor worked until his hands were raw, fearing that every moment would be his last. But then, one morning, he sails past the breakwater into the harbor. Suddenly, the motion stops. The roaring ceases. The water around the ship becomes as flat as a mirror of glass. The silence is so profound it rings in his ears. He drops the anchor, and it holds firm. He realizes, with tears streaming down his salt-crusted face, I am safe. I have arrived. Thou art that sailor. The harbor is here. The struggles of thy youth, the misunderstandings, the loneliness, they were the storm. But thou hast navigated through them. This lightness is the peace of the harbor. The spiritual war for thy soul's freedom has been won on thy watch. From this point forward, thy vision changes. Because the lens of thy heart has been washed clean by thy tears, thou seest the world as it truly is. Thou lookest back at the painful memories that used to haunt thee, and behold, they have lost their sting. Thou seest them not as tragedies, but as necessary chapters in the epic of thy growth. Thou understandest why that person had to leave. Thou understandest why that failure had to happen. The puzzle pieces fall into place, and the picture they form is one of beautiful, intricate design. This is the state of grace. The static noise that used to block thy intuition is gone. Now, when God speaks, thou hearest him clearly. Thy intuition becomes sharp, immediate, and infallible. Thou needest not struggle to find the path anymore. The path unfolds before thy feet with every step. This is the ultimate reward for the high soul. To live in this world, but not be weighed down by it. To walk through the fire and not smell of smoke. So, I ask thee, dost thou feel the stirrings of this lightness? Even if it is but a small glimmer right now, trust it. It is the morning star heralding the sunrise. Do not fear that the darkness will return and swallow thee again. Once a butterfly emerges from the cocoon, it can never turn back into a caterpillar. Thou hast changed. The gravity of the earth has less hold on thee now. Breathe in this freedom. It is thine. Thou hast earned it through 1,000 nights of endurance. Now, the real life, the life of joy and mission, begins. The clouds have parted, my friend. Look up, and see the face of the sun smiling upon thee. Chapter 7: The Law of Connection and Guidance. We enter now into the realm of the path, the practical unfolding of thy new reality. Thou hast cleansed thy vessel. Thou hast survived the clearing of the dead leaves. Now, as thy vibration steadies in the high places, the world around thee begins to respond in a manner most miraculous. Have thine eyes perceived the change? I speak of the second spiritual sign that manifests when a soul reaches its maturity, the increase of divine coincidences. Reflect upon thy recent days. Has it not happened that thou wert pondering a question in the silence of thy heart, perhaps? A worry about thy health, or a query about the direction of thy work, and suddenly, the answer appeared before thee unbidden? Perchance thou didst open a book at random, and the very first sentence thine eyes fell upon contained the exact wisdom thou needed. Or perhaps thou wert walking in the street, thinking of an old friend with whom thou hadst lost touch, and lo! Thou turnest the corner, and there they stand, or a message from them arrives at that very hour. Thou mightest overhear a conversation between strangers in a marketplace that speaks directly to the secret burden of thy soul. The skeptic calls this chance. The sleeper calls it luck. But thou, with thy awakened sight, knowest better. These are not random accidents of a chaotic universe. Nay, they are the visible threads of the divine web, finally catching the light. I call this the alignment of fate. It is the evidence that thou hast stepped onto the golden line of guidance prepared for thee by God. Because thy vibration is now pure and unclouded by the static of lower emotions, the laws of the universe have begun to work in thy favor. The machinery of destiny is moving smoothly, stripped of the rust of resistance. Consider, if thou wilt, the invisible air around us. It is filled with radio waves, carrying music and voices from all corners of the earth. But if thy receiver is broken, or tuned to the static between stations, thou hearest only noise. For years, thy receiver was clogged with the interference of trauma and the heavy expectations of others. But now thou art a pristine vessel. Thou hast become a beacon, a transmitter of clear, high intent. And because light attracts light, thou art drawing unto thyself the people, the information, and the opportunities that vibrate at the same frequency of truth. This is the mechanics of what men call the law of attraction, but its root is far deeper than mere desire. It is the magnetism of the soul's depth. When thou desirest to meet someone, thy thought goes out like a silent dove, and the universe orchestrates the meeting with elegant precision. I tell thee, these moments are the winks of God. They are His way of saying, I am here, I am listening, and I am arranging the pieces for thy victory. Therefore, treat every coincidence as a holy message. It is the prelude to a miracle. Furthermore, thou mayest find strange urges rising within thee. Specifically, a sudden, inexplicable desire to visit a holy place, a shrine nestled in the woods, a temple by the sea, or simply a spot where the earth's energy is raw and potent. There is no logical reason for this pull. Thou hast no business there, no appointment. Yet, the pull is as strong as gravity. Heed this call. It is thy soul seeking to recharge. It is thy spirit recognizing a power spot where the veil between heaven and earth is thin. And it wishes to plug itself into that source to download the next set of instructions. Understand this while thou art in a period of great transition. The seeds thou hast sown in tears during the long winter of thy youth are now cracking open the soil. The harvest is beginning. The intuition that flashes in thy mind, that sudden hunch to go left instead of right, to call this person, to start this project, is not a whim. It is the green light from thy guardian spirits. They are working overtime now, for the channel is finally open. They are sending thee the map to thy destiny, one impulse at a time. Imagine thou art driving a chariot on a great highway. For years, thou wert stuck in the mud of the side roads, fighting the ruts and the rocks. But now, the wheels have hit the smooth pavement. The lights before thee are turning green, one after another, in a perfect wave of permission. This is what it feels like when the soul aligns with its mission. The struggle ceases, and the flow begins. But here is the warning and the encouragement. Thou must trust these signals. When the intuition strikes, do not kill it with the sword of logic. Do not let the fearful mind say, "But that makes no sense," or "I have not the money," or "What will people think?" The logic of God often looks like foolishness to men. If thou feelest the nudge, act upon it. The path is paved only as thou walkest it. These signs are the breadcrumbs leading thee out of the forest of confusion and into the clearing of thy purpose. Thou art being guided to a destiny that was written in the stars before thou tookest thy first breath. The luck thou art experiencing is simply the interest paid on the suffering thou didst endure. It is the universe balancing the scales. So, when the right book falls off the shelf, read it. When the right person crosses thy path, speak to them. When the urge to go comes, go. Thou art no longer wandering blind. Thou art being led by the hand of the Almighty. The road ahead is bathed in light. Drive on, noble soul, for the way is prepared. Chapter 8: The Sanctuary of Silence. We continue our walk along the path, moving deeper into the forest of wisdom. We have spoken of the signs that appear on the outside, the coincidences and the shifting of relationships. Now, let us turn our gaze to the most essential practice for the high soul, the cultivation of silence. This is the second pillar of the way. Look back through the annals of history, observing from the high vantage point of the eagles. Where did the great prophets, the awakened sages, and the masters of old find their enlightenment? Did they find it in the crowded market square? Did they find it amidst the shouting of the political forum or the revelry of the banquet hall? Nay, Moses climbed the mountain. Jesus went into the wilderness. The Buddha sat beneath the tree. The hermits sought the caves. They all withdrew. They stepped away from the noise of men to hear the whisper of the divine. This is not a coincidence, it is a necessity of spiritual physics. Thou, too, surely feelest this pull. Is there not a part of thee that craves the stillness of an empty church, the hush of a deep forest, or the rhythmic solitude of the ocean waves? Perhaps thou hast chastised thyself for this, thinking, I should be more social. I should be out in the world, doing things. But I say unto thee that craving is the hunger of thy soul for its true home. The silence is not empty. Silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation. Consider the metaphor of the jar of river water. Scoop up water from a rushing stream, and it is cloudy, filled with swirling mud, sand, and debris. This is the state of the human mind in the modern world. It is agitated by the constant bombardment of information, the opinions of others, the fears of the news, and the demands of the ego. As long as the jar is shaken, the water remains opaque. Thou canst not see through it. Thou canst not see the reflection of the sun upon its surface. But take that jar and place it on a stone in a quiet grove. Leave it alone. Do not touch it. Do not stir it. What happens? Slowly, inevitably, the heavy earth sinks to the bottom. The sediment settles, and the water above becomes clear as crystal. Only then can it reflect the face of heaven. This is what happens when thou seekest solitude. The sediment of the world, the heavy vibrations of stress, anger, and confusion that thou hast picked up, needs time to sink. Thou art a vessel of high sensitivity. Thou absorbeth more than others. Therefore, thou needest more time in stillness to let it settle. To deny thyself this time is to condemn thyself to live in a perpetual fog. The sanctuary of silence is the fortress that protects thy vibration. It is the cleaning chamber where thou washest off the dust of the journey. And what dost thou find when the water clears? Thou findest the entrance to the inner library. Within the soul of the high vibration being, there lies an archive vast beyond measure. It is the library of the cosmos, containing the records of all thy past lives, the wisdom of the ancients, and the direct laws of the universe. But the door to this library opens only in the absence of noise. When thou art alone, truly alone, without the distraction of scrolls or screens, thou beginnest to read the atmosphere. Insights bubble up from the depths. Solutions to problems that baffled thee for months suddenly appear, simple and elegant. This is not thy brain thinking, this is thy soul remembering. The high soul does not fear being alone, for they are never truly alone. In the silence, they are in the company of the Most High. They are conversing with the stars. While the world runs about seeking happiness in external toys and loud gatherings, the wise soul sits quietly and drinks from the fountain of internal joy. The world calls this loneliness and pities it. The soul calls it solitude and treasures it. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the glory of being alone. Thou hast crossed the bridge from one to the other. So, I invite thee to embrace this need for quietude as a holy calling. Do not apologize for leaving the party early. Do not feel guilty for turning off the devices of man to listen to the birds of God. When thou walkest among the trees, thou art walking in a cathedral built without hands. The vibration of nature, the hum of the earth, the rustle of the leaves, is the tuning fork that resets thy own frequency back to Om. If thou findest that thou art more at peace with the trees than with people, it is proof that thy soul remembers its origin. Thou art vibrating at the frequency of creation itself. This practice of silence is the fuel for thy future mission. Thou canst not pour from an empty cup. Thou canst not guide others out of the noise if thou art deafened by it thyself. By guarding thy solitude, thou art guarding the clarity of the message thou art destined to deliver. Build thy fortress of silence. Visit it daily. Let the mud settle, for it is only in the clear water of a still soul that the light of the divine purpose can be perfectly reflected. Be still and know. Chapter 9: The Law of the Late Bloomer. Come now, and let us stand together upon the hill of the future, looking back at the winding road thou hast traveled. We address now the mystery of time. Many of thee carry a secret fear within thy hearts. Thou lookest at the calendar of thy years and whisperest, Is it too late for me? Thou seest others who found their success in the morning of their youth, while thou didst labor in the shadows of obscurity. Thou thinkest, My spring has passed, and I have no fruit to show. Banish such thoughts, for I am here to reveal to thee the divine logic of the late bloomer. It is the absolute law of the high soul that they bloom most gloriously in the latter half of their earthly journey. Let us consider the parable of the great bamboo. When the farmer plants the seed of this giant grass, he waters it, he tends the soil, and he waits. For 1 year, nothing happens. Not a sprout breaks the surface. The neighbors mock him, saying, Thou art watering dead earth, foolish man. He waters it for a 2nd year. Still nothing. A 3rd year passes. A 4th. To the eyes of the ignorant, the seed is dead, and the labor is wasted. But the farmer knows the secret. He knows that beneath the surface, in the dark silence of the earth, a massive, intricate root system is spreading. It is anchoring itself deep into the bedrock, preparing to hold a weight that no ordinary grass could sustain. Then, in the 5th year, the miracle occurs. The bamboo breaks the soil and shoots up to the heavens, growing 90 feet in mere weeks. It dominates the forest. But tell me, did it grow in 6 weeks? Nay, it grew in 5 years and 6 weeks. Without the deep, invisible rooting of the first 5 years, that rapid ascent would have destroyed it. Thou art that bamboo, the wasted years of thy youth, the decades of struggle where thou felt thou wert making no progress, those were thy rooting years. Because the height of thy destiny is so great, the depth of thy roots had to be equal to it. A soul destined to be a low shrub needs little root, but a soul destined to be a tower of light needs a foundation that touches the core of the earth. The silence, the delay, the frustration, it was all the necessary work of the underground. Thou wert not stagnant, thou wert building the capacity to hold the power that is now coming to thee. God's plan for the high soul is often constructed in 2 distinct acts. Act 1 is the school of earth. This is the time of trial, of mud, of learning the harsh lessons of human nature. It is designed to be heavy. Why? Because to save a drowning man, one must know the nature of the water. To heal a broken heart, one must know the sound of breaking. God immersed thee in the deep end of life's pool so that thou wouldst learn empathy, humility, and resilience. This period feels like a curse while thou art in it, but it is actually a spiritual charging period. Thou wert absorbing energy, wisdom, and experience, storing it in the batteries of thy soul. Now, we enter Act 2, the time of fruition. This usually begins in the middle years of life and extends to the very end. The charging is complete, the roots are set, and suddenly, the energy shifts from intake to output. It is as if a seal has been broken, and the stored karma of thy good deeds begins to flood back to thee. This is the law of spiritual interest. Every tear thou didst shed was a deposit in the bank of heaven. Every time thou didst choose kindness over bitterness, thou wert buying stock in thy own future. Now, the dividends are due, and because the investment was long and hard, the payout is immense. The suffering of the past returns to thee now as a shield of protection and a wind of luck. Thou wilt notice a change in the nature of the divine protection around thee. In thy youth, the protection was like a strict teacher or a guardrail. It often came in the form of no. It blocked thee from paths that were not thine, often painfully. It allowed thee to fall so thou couldst learn to stand. But in the latter years, the protection changes. It becomes like a loving partner, a strong wind in thy sails. It shifts from correction to propulsion. Why? Because thy vessel is now ready. Thy ego has been tamed by the trials. God knows that if He gives thee power and influence now, thou wilt not use it to destroy thyself or others. Thou wilt use it to serve. Therefore, the floodgates of blessing are opened. This is why the high soul becomes happier, healthier, and more vibrant as they age. While the world glorifies youth, the spiritual man glorifies maturity. The wine of thy soul has been fermenting in the dark cellar for decades. Cheap wine is made in a month and turns to vinegar quickly. But thou art a vintage of great price, intended for the king's table. The darkness of the cellar was not a tomb, it was a womb. And now, the cork is drawn. The richness of thy character, the complexity of thy wisdom, the aroma of thy presence, these are things that only time and pressure could create. Do not look back at the lost years with regret. They were not lost. They were the price paid for the crown thou art about to wear. Thy destiny was never to be a flash in the pan, a young star that burns out by 30. Thy destiny is to be the sun that warms the afternoon and sets in a blaze of glory. The second half of thy life is promised to be the golden age. The struggles of the past will seem like a dream, fading in the light of the peace that now surrounds thee. Thou hast survived the pruning. Thou hast survived the winter. Now, stand tall, spread thy branches, for it is finally, thy time to bloom. Chapter 10 As a Lighthouse of Light. We arrive now at the summit of the mountain. We have journeyed through the valleys of sorrow, climbed the cliffs of solitude, and navigated the forests of transformation. Now, standing at the peak, under the open canopy of the heavens, we ask the final question. What was it all for? Why did God carve thee with such sharp tools? Why did he set thee apart in the wilderness of loneliness? The answer lies not in what thou art to get from the world, but in what thou art to give to it. The ultimate characteristic of the high soul, the blooming of the flower in its final glory, is the role of the lighthouse. Understand this truth, and let it settle deep within thy bones. The reason thou art here, the reason thou hast survived the crushing weight of thy earlier years, is because thou art appointed to be a beacon. Thy role is no longer to fight the darkness, but simply to shine. Consider the nature of the lighthouse that stands upon the jagged rocks of the coast. Does the lighthouse run back and forth along the beach, frantically searching for ships to save? Does it swim out into the stormy waves, shouting at the captains to turn around? Nay, the lighthouse stands still. It is immovable. It simply stands in its appointed place, grounded in the rock, and lets its light spin across the black waters. It does nothing but be what it is. And yet, by its mere presence, countless ships are saved from the rocks. Countless sailors find their way home. Without a word, without a gesture, the lighthouse brings safety to the perilous night. This is thy destiny. This is the mission of being that the high soul steps into in the latter years. Thou hast spent decades trying to do good, trying to fix people, trying to save the world with thy hands. But God says to thee now, rest, my child. Thy striving is over. Thy shining has begun. Because thy vibration has been purified by the fires of thy past, thou hast become a living transmitter of divine love. Thou art what the ancients called a walking sanctuary. Have not people told thee recently that they feel calm just sitting near thee? Do not strangers open their hearts to thee in the line at the market, telling thee their deepest secrets? This is not an accident. It is because thy aura has become a safe harbor. Thy very presence regulates the chaotic energy of the room. When thou walkest into a place filled with anger or fear, thou needest not say a word. Thy vibration acts like a tuning fork, bringing the discordant notes back into harmony. This is the secret reason for thy isolation in the past. If a lighthouse is built in the middle of the city, its light is lost among the street lamps. It must be set apart to be effective. Thy loneliness was not a punishment, it was a strategic positioning by the divine. Thou wert kept separate so that thy light would not be dimmed by the compromise of the crowd. Thou wert kept pure so that now, in the time of great need, thou couldst shine with a brilliance that pierces the fog. The suffering thou didst endure was the oil for thy lamp. A lamp with no oil gives no light. Thy compassion, born of deep pain, is the fuel that makes thy beam visible to those who are lost. Thou mayest think, but I am tired. I have nothing left to give. Ah, but that is the beauty of this stage. The lighthouse does not use its own energy to shine, it is plugged into a power source far greater than itself. Thou art no longer shining with the limited battery of thy ego. Thou art a clear channel for the infinite light of God. As long as thou remain connected to the source through thy silence and thy trust, the light flows through thee, not from thee. Thou art not the generator, thou art the bulb. Therefore, thou shalt not burn out. In fact, the more thou allowest this light to flow, the more energized thou shalt become. To heal others by thy presence is to be healed thyself in the process. This is the grand design of thy life. Every tear thou hast shed was a polishing of the glass of thy lantern. Every betrayal thou hast forgiven was the cleaning of the lens. And now, the lamp is lit. Thou art the elder soul, the wise one, the keeper of the peace. Thy mission is simply to walk through this world with an open heart. Smile at the child in the street. Listen to the old woman's story. Sit quietly in the park and bless the trees. These small acts are not small. On the spiritual plane, they are nuclear explosions of love that shift the destiny of the earth. Thou art resolving the karma of thy lineage, of thy city, of thy world, simply by breathing in light and breathing out peace. So, I say unto thee with all the reverence of my heart, do not hide thy light under a bushel of false modesty. Do not say, I am nobody. Thou art a child of the Most High, forged in the fire, tempered in the flood, and raised up for such a time as this. The world is noisy, dark, and confused. It needs thee. It needs thy stability. It needs the silent assurance that comes from a soul that has looked the devil in the eye and survived. Thou art the proof that light wins. Thou art the living testimony that the dawn always comes. Accept this mantle of the light bearer. It is heavy, yes, but it is also glorious. It is the robe of honor reserved for the veterans of the Spirit. Be the lighthouse. Stand firm in thy truth. Let the storms rage around thee, they cannot touch thee now. For thou art built on the rock of ages. Shine forth, beloved soul. Shine forth, and guide the weary home. This is thy purpose. This is thy reward. This is the final and eternal truth of thy being. Thou art, and have always been, the light of the world. Epilogue to the Promised Land. Hearken to my final words, beloved soul. Those with high souls often find this world a difficult place in which to dwell, for its vibration is frequently heavy and low compared to thine own. But know this: the kindness thou possessest, the solitude thou hast endured, and the depth born of thy suffering are the very proofs of thy strength. If thy youth felt unrewarded, it was not because thou wert of little value. Nay, it was because thy soul was already too mature for the common measure of the world. God's plan hath set this very time, the later years of thy life, as the season for thy true light to shine. The virtues thou hast stored up in silence are now returning to thee as a mighty shield of divine protection. Thou shalt surely be rewarded. This is the law of the universe and a promise from the divine. Every tear thou hast shed is now a power to heal others. Fear nothing. Thou art strictly protected, and a great, beautiful flower is about to bloom in the garden of thy life. Believe in the guidance that led thee here, and live in peace. Thank you for watching. With gratitude.